Hey everyone, it's Christoph. Today I'll be showing you yet another very interesting, quite detailed sacrifice in the Sicilian Najdorf. First and foremost, I would like to say happy holidays to anyone who's watching, as it is Christmas Eve as of today. And I would also like to further note, I would like to apologize for not making a video in a while. I've been quite busy with school and whatnot, but I'm back for the holidays, and I'm ready to resume these videos for your enjoyment. Alright, so without further ado, let's begin. So today I'll be showing you a line in the Sicilian Najdorf that's, it gets quite complex. There's many variations. However, once you memorize these variations, and you actually go to understand why these variations are played, it will greatly improve your winning chances with this opening. Okay, so let's begin. So the variation I'll be showing you is the correct variation, and then after I will show you all the incorrect detours that many people will be very tempted to follow. Okay, the game begins with pawn to e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, the pawns are exchanged, knight comes to f6 to hit e4, it's defended, in a6. Obviously this move is aimed to put some pressure on the b5 square, so the bishop cannot come here. Here we say bishop c4, pawn e6, this kind of keeps the bishop off f7, so this is actually a very strong move. Bishop b3, bishop e7, white castles, black castles, and now bishop to e3. So far so good. It is quite equal here. But the game continues with pawn to b5, f4, b4, knight a4, bishop b7, pawn e5, and this is where things get quite a bit hairy. This is where it gets a little complex. After pawn takes, we actually do not take with the pawn. This is actually the incorrect move. The correct move here, and I'm wondering if you can see it. If you like, feel free to pause your video and see if you can find it. But the correct move here is actually knight takes e6. So quite a stunning move. It does look like just drops a piece for a pawn. This is not looking too good for white. However, this is actually entirely correct. This is a very strong move, if not the best move, arguably. So the correct continuation goes as follows. We see f takes. Now queen takes d8. We're clearing off the d file of the queens. Rook takes d8. Bishop takes e6 check. The king moves. F takes e5, and this is the part where many people tend to mess up and they go into variations that are not entirely correct. The correct move according to book, and I should further note that I found this variation in particular while looking at a opening book database a number of weeks ago, and I've been spending a lot of my time between then and now trying to sort out all the variations and trying to understand how exactly this works and why it works for white. But you'll see in a second. The correct move here is actually knight g8, and if you're going to continue to play correctly, the correct moves that follow are knight b6, so we're hitting the rook on a8. The rook moves, it has to flinch. Rook a d1, knight c6, rook takes, knight takes, bishop takes g8, king takes g8, and now knight c8. We're hitting the bishop on e7, but at the same time we've discovered the bishop on e3, and now we're attacking the rook on a7. You can't save both, so it's best for black to take the knight, and you have to go down and exchange now. After knight c6, bishop b6, this is where the line ends. This is about actually I'd say equal endgame for both players. Although I do have to say I would favor black here. He seems to have a little bit more, coordination with his pieces. That's what I should say. However, white does have the exchange, and he does have a center e-pawn that is quite strong at the moment. However, that might be picked off by the knight at some point. Here, if knight takes e5, then this may be rook e1, bishop f6, and it doesn't get so clear after bishop d4. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and delve into the variations that are not so correct, and these are played surprisingly often. So if we back up, when I said that people mess up, I was referring to knight g8, this move here. First, let's consider another knight move. Suppose he doesn't play the correct move. Suppose he plays knight fd7. Suppose he goes this route. Well, simply, I should also know that in all these variations, it's technically impossible for black to maintain the piece he is up right now. White has amazing compensation. He has very excellent coordination. He's got pressure down the f-file. This is not very easy for black to maintain, and it's not necessarily correct for him to maintain the piece he's banked. Suppose knight fd7, simply play rook a d1. Now we're putting pressure on d7, and we're actually threatening this move, rook f7, here one day. Suppose he plays a move like a5. He wants to maintain the piece. He seems to be alright right now. Well, now we play knight b6. We're threatening d7, and at the same time hitting the rook on a8. Suppose he plays bishop c6. We'll simply go knight takes a8, bishop takes a8, and now rook f7. And it's at this point we actually win the piece back. It's not possible for black to maintain. Okay, so if we go back, suppose black plays, instead of knight g8 or knight fd7, suppose he plays knight d5. What can go wrong here? Doesn't it look like he's just banking the piece still? Not quite. We have this again, rook a d1, h6, bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, knight b6 again, and we're attacking the bishop and the rook. After rook a7, simply knight takes d5, and we are winning some stuff back. Alright, suppose he goes, instead of knight g8, he doesn't go knight fd7, he doesn't go knight d5, suppose he goes knight h5. Well, again, I'm sure you can actually see the winning move here. There's actually, you can go right away for g4, or you can play around with him for a little bit. Knight b6, rook a7, now g4, and the piece is pretty much won back. If he goes knight c6, simply knight d5, rook a8, knight takes e7, knight takes e7, and then we just take then g4. That's really all it is. Now suppose he plays, instead of any of those moves, suppose he plays just knight e8. Right here he plays knight, oops, excuse me. My notes got a little messed up. Here he goes knight e8. Again, it looks like in all these variations, when you first initially look at it, it looks like if he's banking the piece, he's maintaining a material advantage. But again, there's just one move here that loses for black, and it's just bishop g5, and we just win the piece back. We're threatening bishop takes e7, and we're also threatening, after that, rook f8 mate. So again, we win the piece back. Okay, suppose from here, he doesn't do any of those, and he goes knight e4. Again, looks like he's banking the piece, he's maintaining a material advantage. He's really not, because we have, again, rook a d1, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, knight c6, simply bishop d5, and we win the piece back. Suppose knight takes e5, bishop takes b7, and this isn't so good for black here. Rook e8, simply bishop takes e4, and again, white is actually much better here. He's actually, I wouldn't necessarily say winning, but he does, if you look closely, he has a 3-2 pawn majority advantage on the queen side. He has better coordination of the pieces, he has the bishop pair, he's looking down the d-file. Life is good for him. So those are really all the knight moves after this tricky f takes e5. But suppose early on he plays something different. Suppose around here. After, say, rook takes d8, let's assume he plays bishop takes d8. Okay, well, now what do we do? It doesn't look like he's paying the piece. He doesn't have to go into any of those variations we just went into. How do we win here? Well, simple actually. It's just f takes e5, knight f d7. Okay, so he's trying to put pressure on the pawn, but simply bishop takes e6 check, king h8, rook a1. And again, I cannot stress how important this rook move is. Right here, this rook a1, many of the variations, these variations include pressure down the d file. That's one of the big takeaways I want you to take from this, is that the d file is very crucial in these variations. Why exactly, I'm not sure. I don't understand why the nature of this opening necessarily delves into these variations. I will make a video, probably my next video or a video after that, as to why these variations tend to occur in the Sicilian, why this naturally tends to come up. But for now, in this variation, after bishop takes d8, rook d1, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, and now we're threatening, some pressure on f8. Not entirely threatening a mate quite yet, because there is knight covering, and if bishop takes d7, simply knight takes d7, and he's still covering f8. But just to be sure, it's best to play h5 here. I believe so. I've speculated and kind of thought about this, but I believe h5 is necessary, as we are putting pressure on the knights. The knight on b8 cannot necessarily come to c6 so easily, because we can just take on d7 and then threaten rook f8 and whatnot. So h5 is a good move to have in the back of your pocket. Here, there's rook f5, so now we're threatening rook h5 mate. So after g6, rook f7, bishop c6, bishop b3, we're protecting our knight. We can't afford to lose another piece, really. He takes off, bishop b6, and after we take everything, there's e6. And this is probably the most interesting variation that I have to show you, because you're not necessarily winning the piece back entirely. In fact, in this variation, all you're really doing is you get this passed a pawn here. Excuse me, it's passed e pawn. I was looking at something over here. You're looking at this passed e pawn in exchange for the piece, and let me tell you, this is extremely dangerous. Black can very easily go wrong here. If he takes the bishop, simply rook f8, king g7, e7, knight c6 is pretty much your only move. If you don't play knight c6, you're pretty much going to have to deal with pawn e8 queen. So you have to pretty much give the rook back. And now we have the rook versus the two knights. So you do, at the end, win the piece back if he decides to take on a4. However, this is not so clear for black at all. I wouldn't even say a little bit. Alright, so suppose after this move here, knight takes e6, f takes e6, suppose he plays, instead of anything, he just plays queen takes d1, right around here. Well, there is a follow-up to this, and this is another variation. These are a lot of things to remember, and when I get to another video, I will explain why, as to why this works. There's a lot of philosophy behind these openers. It does get quite complex, quite beautiful in a way, if you ask me. Anyways, the continuation is supposed to go rook a1, f takes e6, bishop takes e6, king h8, f takes e5. This looks a little bit similar. This is this pawn e5, and the knight has to decide where he wants to go. Kind of a deja vu moment, I'm not gonna lie. Knight g8, and well, here there's just rook takes f8, bishop takes f8. After knight b6, rook a7, rook d8, and black is in a lot of trouble here. if he goes knight c6, his rook takes f8, and we're threatening rook g8 mate. So I think this is probably the most important variation, remember, here, because if he takes the queen and he actually goes into this variation, he's really setting himself up for mate, and this variation right here. But yeah, that's actually all I have for now. Those are all the variations. I spent weeks trying to put these variations together because there's just so much that can happen. I have notes everywhere on this particular opener. It does get quite complex, I understand, but once you master this particular variation, all these types of sacrifices, and not just memorize them, but the most important thing is to understand why they work, then you will be at a point in your chess study where you will kind of fully appreciate, and you will grow from that, and I truly believe that. Anyways, that's all I have for now. As always, hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.